Hello and welcome back. We've got a great double exposure for you. This is actually, I guess, a quadruple exposure. We're going to be using lighten modes, darken modes, we're going to be painting with a brush tool, all kinds of different things to create a wonderful effect. Now, jumping into Photoshop, let's go ahead and double click here in our background. Let's go to our sample images, and we're here in our section 6. Oh my gosh, we are almost done. So let's go to our man in the woods. Let's go ahead and open up all of these examples. There we are. Let's go ahead and we're going to start with our man here. So let's go ahead and hold Shift and click and drag from one image to another. There we are. We'll close these out as we're going along here. There we are, and hit F for full screen. Now, we know here, I'm getting ahead of myself. If you want your background layer, you can see how it has a lock here. If you want to convert that to a smart object, just double click on it, and it'll convert it to a regular layer. Just hit OK. It's a regular layer now. So I'm going to convert all these to smart objects now. There we go. It's just good practice for double exposures. There we are. Now let's go ahead and create a black and white adjustment layer on the top of everything and see what we have here. So we're starting off with our base image. This is our main subject. And I'm going to extend our canvas just a little bit. So let's hit C for our crop tool, and we're going to go ahead and crop out in this direction. If you hold Alt or Option, it'll crop out in at all directions simultaneously. There we are. Okay, the first image we're going to lay in here is this image. This is going to go on the bottom, and this we're going to use the darken blending mode because we want these trees to kind of line up with the bottom of our subject here. So we want him to kind of disappear into this tree line. That's kind of my goal. Now again, choosing these images, we have a subject who looks like he enjoys spending time in the woods. You know, he's got a little bit longer beard, hair's a little bit on the shaggy side. So that was part of, you know, how I chose these images for this tutorial. Again, we want the background to kind of mimic whatever's going on in the subject. Now, what we have to do is, I want these to blend together. They don't just yet. You can see the darks just kind of, you know, my subject's much darker than the background. So we're going to use our levels adjustment, Control Command L, because it's a smart object. And I'm going to take my black point and simply bring this from the left to the right. There we go. And as I do that, you can see basically it just makes my darks darker and everything kind of blends together now. And here we're able to choose, you know, where we want this to kind of come together. I think that looks really nice there. Maybe I'll hit my crop tool, C for the crop tool, and just give us a little bit more space there on the bottom. So I think this is already looking quite good. Now we've got our next layer here. We've got our layer 4, and this we're actually going to add over top of our subject's head. So this time it's going to be a lighten blend mode. So let's change this blend mode from normal to lighten, and there we go. This we're going to kind of bring in to this area. And we need to do a couple things here. Okay, the first thing we need to do is I need the hair area, the air like behind his hair, I need that to be a little bit darker. Okay. So let's try to not get confusing here. The reason I need it darker is because you can see it's actually lighter than the background. So to make that area darker, what we're going to do is create a new layer here, and I'm going to use my brush tool and I'm going to sample this color here, or this tone rather. And I'm just on a regular layer here, but I'm going to paint right over top of our subject. And as I do, you're going to see it totally covers up my subject. But I'm going to change my layer blend mode from normal down to darken. There we go. And now this set to darken is simply just going to only affect the lighter areas. So essentially what we're doing here is there we go, we're taking this background and just kind of extending it up. There we are, and I'm going to kind of extend it out in this direction also. So that looks pretty good. So we've just darkened that area up. Now we can bring in this exposure here and start to get it to work with our existing image. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hit Control or Command T. We're just going to transform this a little bit. I just want to make sure that it actually like kind of fits. There we go. I think that looks good. And now I need my background of this layer to be a little bit lighter, okay? Because you can still see some of the hair. So let's hit Control Command L here, and we're going to take our lights and we're going to make them a little bit lighter. Alright, we're going to make our darks a bit darker. There we go. I just want to kind of create a natural fall off there. Alright, let's go ahead and put a layer mask on here. We're going to paint black on the layer mask down here. So we definitely don't want that to show up down there. Alright. I think that's looking pretty good. And then, let's see, we're going to use our layer mask here. I also want to layer mask out this area here. Just want to make sure this shows up. There we are. So we get this nice natural termination of our subject's head, basically. Let's hit Controller Command T. We can size this and scale this as we want. I kind of like this, how his hair just kind of like turns into that tree. I think this does look actually pretty good. So we have one problem here, and that's the fact that this bright area just doesn't make it look realistic. So we're going to create a new layer on top of this, and I'm going to use my brush tool again to paint with this layer, and we're just going to put this to darken. Okay, so same idea. This layer is set to darken now. Basically just makes that lighter area in the sky totally disappear. There we are. And turning this layer off and on, I'm going to do a little bit of masking right there. Alright, there we are. That looks really good there too. So we're using this darken blending mode a couple of times here. You can see these are two cases when we've just painted with the background color on darken. So in this case we extended the background here. This case we brought in our image, everything looked really good except for this was a little bit too light. So we were able to add that again and then make it darker again. So we're looking really good. Now the top of the trees are still like totally made up of hair, and I want them to fade into the trees a little bit more. This layer here, you can see this is our tree layer for the top. What we're going to do, similar to our last tutorial, we've got it set to lighten. Now I'm going to duplicate this. So let's click and drag this to the new layer icon. Bring it above that other layer that was set to darken. Remember? And then this one is going to be set, we're going to change this from lighten to darken. Let me just go through that again because I know it's getting a little confusing. We brought in this layer set to lighten, and this is for the sky. Now, the sky was a little bit too bright, so then we brought in this layer set to darken, and that basically made that completely visible. Now, we're bringing this layer in, set to darken, and this gives us the natural look of our images. Okay, so this one was basically to take part of his head and replace it with sky. I know that sounds weird, but that's basically what we're doing. And this one was to add tree definition back in. So let's click on our layer mask. We're going to go to Edit and down to Fill. We're going to fill this with black. And now we can simply paint white where we want, and our trees are going to come right back in. There we are. And we can kind of fade that in if we want to. There we go. I'm going to create a little brush and just do a little bit of randomization there. Very, very cool. Okay, now I included this other layer here, this layer 3, as another example. So let's go ahead and bring this up to the top here. I'm going to set this from normal to darken as well. And then we added this layer if you want a little bit more like growth on the under, or if you want to add a little bit more detail here to the top. Like if you wanted to add that tree in right there, for instance, all you'd have to do is hold Alt or Option and click on your layer mask. That will create a black layer mask. And then you can just paint white on your layer mask right here, and boom, you got a tree right there. You can kind of move that around as well. And of course, if you wanted to show up more or less, you can use your levels on that. Okay, you can also do the same. Let's just fill this layer mask with white. So Shift Delete is the keyboard shortcut for your fill dialog. So let's fill this with white. There we are. I'm going to apply a levels adjustment, Control or Command L. Let's make our darks a little bit darker. There we are. And then we could kind of bring this in anywhere else that we wanted. For instance, if you wanted, multiple layers of tree. There we go. That could look pretty nice towards the end. So let's click on our layer mask. We're going to go to Edit, down to Fill that with black. And there we are. And then we're going to paint white on our layer mask, just right here. There we are. And that's just going to kind of close that image out a little bit more. There we are. And I'm going to duplicate that layer. Control or Command J to duplicate that. Let's go ahead and bring it over and click on our layer mask. We'll go to Edit and then down to Fill and fill this with white. There we are. And then we could kind of bring this over here. Maybe we'll make this smaller. Control or Command T to make this smaller. Now we're just kind of getting into the fun of it, which, I definitely want to that's a big part of creating these double exposures, is once you kind of get the hang of it, it's just kind of fun. So I would encourage you to just kind of get in there and play around, see what you can do, see how many different images you can combine together, because there's really no limit. It's just kind of let your imagination go wild a little bit. There we go. I want to find a nice area where this one tree just kind of fades right into this other one. I'm not really finding that so much here. Maybe I'll just make this a little smaller. Control or Command T. There we are. And we'll just paint black on the layer mask just right here. Cool. So it just kind of fades from one to the other, and then we can choose to use this or not. Either way, totally look good. There we go. We'll probably cut off the exposure right about there. Now we're looking really great. Let's go ahead and collapse all of these. There we are, and we are almost done. Up next, we're going to add some birds. So you got to have birds in your double exposures, and then we're going to crop this image back down again just to not include all the extra stuff, and then we're going to be done. Let's go ahead and find our bird image here. This is, in this case, it's layer 2. We'll bring this all the way to the very top. There we are. Now let's use our move tool here, and what I'm going to do is just grab our lasso. So let's hit L for the lasso tool, and we're just going to make let's get that bird too. We're just going to make a nice lasso selection right over there. Let's include the edge of that. And that lasso selection we're going to use as our layer mask. So if you have a selection active, all you have to do is click on your layer mask icon, and it'll automatically turn that into a selection. Now these birds here, because they're kind of cut off on the edge, either we're going to have to mask them out, or we're going to have to just have them fade into black with another part of our image. So let's see what we can do. Now our layer blend mode, we want the white to disappear and just the birds to be visible. So let's set that to darken. There we are, and all of a sudden we have birds. Hit Control or Command T to transform, and keep in mind we used a smart object when we started here, so I can transform this in any which way, and it's totally totally good there. All right, there we are, and we can kind of choose what we want to do here with these birds. Let's just hit enter there, we can kind of move them around and see where we want them to be. In that case, in this view, they're kind of like flying out of the trees. I think that looks pretty good. So keep in mind the two that were cut off were right there, but there we go, that looks good. Let's just mask those off really quick. That's looking really nice. How fun is that? Cool, good. I think that composition works pretty well. Let's make those birds just a little bit larger so they stand out a little bit more. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and crop this image down. So let's hit C for the crop tool. We're going to just click and drag our crop. Now the crop tool and also the marquee tools, by the way, if you're clicking and dragging and you want to move this, just hold spacebar and you can move your crop at any time. Okay, there we go. And we're just going to bring this right down here. Make sure we get all the way to the bottom of this layer there. And hit that checkbox. Now, when you're cropping, my suggestion is there's an option to delete crop pixels. Make sure this is not checked. Because if this is not checked, like in this case it was unchecked, I can always click here on my image and I can get back that information if I want it. If this is checked, then it just deletes those pixels and you will not be able to get those back. So anytime you crop in Photoshop, I highly recommend unchecking this option that says delete crop pixels. I like this image quite a bit. I think it looks great. Let's go to our original. There we go. This is our original photograph. You can see we've extended our ground quite a bit. Okay, then remember we needed that to blend together a little bit better, so we added some more sky, and then we just used a darken blend mode to do that. Real easy. Then we added the trees in his head. That's creating the double exposure effect that we all seen and it's become very popular. Now it's too light there, so we've added this to darken it. And then we added more tree detail back into the image. Okay, we added a tree off to the right and off to the left. Kind of just frame this out a little bit more. Looks like that one just need to mask away there. And then we added our birds to the image, and there we go. Let's go ahead and create, I'm going to just do a levels adjustment layer at the very top to give us another variation. So we have our black and white variation. Remember, you can always use a gradient map if you'd like, or you can use levels. In this case, I'm going to go to my blue channel. We're going to pull up our, I'm in my green channel. We'll go to our blue channel. I'm going to pull up my output levels a little bit and pull down. There we go. And what this does is it puts a little bit of blues in our shadows. There we go. And it puts a little bit of yellow in our highlights. So it just gives us a really nice kind of cyanotype image. There we go. Maybe we'll put a little green in the shadows too, because after all, it is kind of a foresty type image. There we go. So you have both options. You can go totally black and white, you can use levels, or I guess as a third option, you can use a gradient map as well. Well, I think this is a great image. A lot came together and it looks really, really good. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next section.